Larney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Craig.
I'm looking the complete opposite.
I always, before a Zoom chat, I always go into makeup and hair and get everything ready.
I just expect it.
Spend an hour with my stylist. Which T-shirt should I wear?
I've just been to Tesco's doing the shopping, Ravi. That's my prep.
Again, we'll just give a few more people a couple more moments, and then we'll get started. I'll quickly do the introductions. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Martin Craig. I work with Jane and Rebecca on the talent pathway. I've kind of reached out to quite a few people to see if they could put on these workshops, particularly during this lockdown, and Phil kindly accepted the invite to talk around his first ideas, first concepts around the 6v6. A lot of what the discussions that Phil and I have had previously when we're talking about this meeting are all kind of theoretical, because we haven't had much opportunity to run the game in practices or as an actual challenge match to anyone. So yes, it's very kind of early stages, nothing set in stone. It's just good to start this because I have my own views, which I won't share right now. I might get triggered in the conversations, but I think during this is let's look at the positives, not look, oh, right, that's going to challenge the 10-a-side game. It's more about where can we go going forward. And to kind of shape that before I introduce Phil and let Phil talk, we've kind of done a little clip it to do a bit of modelling. So my colleague Jason, he's just going to play the video for you all just to have a 2-minute look at to shape your thoughts if you've not seen the game before. Thanks, Jason. So, again, just to give you a bit of context, that was the first 2 minutes of the start of the game. I'm going to hand over to Phil and let Phil kind of share his initial thoughts and ideas. Over to you, Phil.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, that's an interesting clip. I think that was about possibly 18 months ago, something like that. One of the very first pilot games that they tried. And in that version you saw, they had a 45-second shot clock they were playing. And I think in the commentary from memory, it says something like, and he very rarely need the shot clock at 45 seconds. Just to pick up on, I'll introduce myself in a second, but just to pick up on something Martin said about not really having had a chance to play. With the England squad, we've actually played a genuine six-a-side game with refs twice. Once before COVID was ever heard of in May 2019 or sometime, and then just before Christmas we had another game at it here. And again, the point I would make is the shot clock has never been an issue for us when we've been attacking. The 30-second shot clock is not really an issue. It does change the game slightly, but it's not a problem. And other than that, the only thing from that clip I would just say, I'm sure all the eagle-eyed amongst you, did the USA ever get the ball behind the goal at all? No, is the answer in that clip. So the fact that when you shoot, you don't automatically get the ball back is another dynamic to the six-side game. Do you necessarily need to be backing up all the shots, have players behind, all that kind of thing? It just adds a different flavour to the game. And my other last point on the clip, just striking me as it's hot, very few fast break scoring opportunities, even though it's supposed to be a transition up and down, up and down. Both times it kind of got to the end and then settled and then went again. So a few things that people say, oh, it's like basketball, it's all up and down. No, it's not. It doesn't have to be. Okay. Phil Collier, I'm currently national team director for the England women's team. And for my sins, will be GB head coach at the World Games for the six-side version next July, August, whenever it's supposed to be. But I would start by saying all my life I played sport, a lot of football as a kid, lacrosse, and I've always played five-a-side football, whatever the small-sided version of the game is. And I've always enjoyed that because that was always the bits that I enjoyed the most, if you like, as a player. Lots of goal-mouth action, chances to score, chances to tackle, chances to outwit your opponent, all those kind of things that I think a five-a-side or a six-a-side version brings. And so I'm looking at Ravi in the middle of my screen here. He'll know we've used to enter teams when I was at Sheffield. We play in the Heaton Mersey six-a-sides. Don't in Stockport have the eight-a-sides. But various one-day tournaments have been played. And some of my best days, the Bath Eights is another one, isn't it? Where you have a small-sided version of the game. It features most of what I would call the fun bits of the game rather than the boring grind in the midfield, the face-offs, draw controls, and so on. And so that comment I think that Martin made about taking a positive, I just don't see a negative to all of this. It's just a small-sided version of the game. It highlights the faster, the more skill aspects, whether that's fleet of foot or fleet of mind. You know, you've got to be outthink and outwit people. I think it just showcases the best. And if this is a developmental version of the game to take it to the world, I also again coach at Charterhouse School. We'd be great at a six-a-side team. We could enter all kinds of tournaments. We'd be competitive. When it gets to 12 and higher numbers, because we only have about 20 girls that play in the school, we're struggling. So I think as a developmental end of the game as well, I think six-a-side is a really good opportunity for lacrosse, both in England, UK, and internationally as well. If you're trying to move it to a new country, presumably six-a-side would be easier to develop and grow and get off the ground, equipment-wise, facilities, numbers. So I just don't see a downside to it myself. I just think it's all positive. The one thing, just given my background, Jay would appreciate this, in sports development, the only way I would see the six-side game, what's that expression, somebody who's taking over from lacrosse, would be if lacrosse got into the Olympics and funding came behind it and there was a full-time GB squad being funded, staying at Bisham Abbey, training just like the hockey girls do now, then that would be the only case where six-a-side lacrosse might get more attention. But that would be a good thing because it would be a lot of resource and a lot of funding would have tipped the balance there. And it's never going to do away with 10-a-side. It's just another version of the game. So, again, if we're worried about lacrosse taking off and getting lots of funding from the government, then I think, you have to think about where you're coming from. But let's get back to six-a-side game. So, I've loved six-a-side all my life. We played it a couple of times with the England squad. What about the new rules then? So we touched on those a little bit earlier. the no shot behind, so the not getting the ball back after a shot, I think is a radical change. And I'm not really sure whether I agree with it or not. I'm not losing any sleep over it. It is what it is. But it does change things slightly. If they're trying to encourage more shots, why would you take away that chance of getting the ball back? But I guess maybe with the shot clock and other things, there are other reasons. I don't know. The other thing which I think is really important, I'm looking at this now with my GB hat on, and given that England are third in the world, Wales and Scotland up there as well, we're definitely medal prospects for an Olympic version of the sport. And the World Games next time, we're definitely a medal prospect. So you're looking at how do we win this. Now, the things in our favour, there are only draw controls or face-off at the start of each of the four quarters. Six-side game is 4 8-minute periods with a 2-minute break, I think, between first and second and third and fourth, and a 5-minute half time. So you're playing 4 8-minute periods. But there's only a face-off or a draw at the start of each of those 4 periods. So in my rudimentary Northern English here, that means you're guaranteed approximately half the possessions in a game. Maybe the other team, if they win the draw, they get one more than you, whatever. And so, whereas again, when England played the USA in California in January 2019, seems like a long time ago now. Basically, we lost that game 14-8, I think. And the main reason was we had a period where we lost 11 draw controls in a row in the middle of the game. We couldn't get the ball. And I think we went from something like 6-4 up to, I don't know, 12-7 down or something like that. We just couldn't get the ball. But the fact that you're guaranteed half the possessions, even if they score every time they get it, you get a possession and a chance to score. You don't have to win the draw to get the possession. So that's a real positive for me. The lower numbers is a positive. Our best 10 might match USA's best 10. But if we're trying to match 15 or 23 or whatever, the men's game, those large squad sizes, 23, they're probably going to do us on depth of quality and talent just because of the numbers game. So the smaller it gets, 6 aside, our best 6, we've got a good chance of playing against anybody. And so, again, I think the numbers are in our favour. And the shorter time periods in games, again, is a leveller, isn't it? So you're not going to get a 50-0 blowout because there just isn't that time to score that many goals. So games are going to be closer and more competitive, I think, for longer. And again, that's credit to the people designing the new rules and everything. They wanted competitive sport that can be shown on the TV, I believe, as an hour programme, guaranteed, and simple and easy to understand for the viewer. So that's kind of where it's coming from. I think they're the main rules. What are the other ones? You can't go over and back. So if you've got the ball into your attacking half, and let's say you pass it back and someone misses it, Ravi misses it when I throw it to him, and it bounces over back into our half, then that's a change of possession. So that's another rule. The one thing that changed that surprised me a little bit was when the first set of trial rules came out, squads were going to be 10 players in a squad with a 6-a-side team. So that's kind of 1 goalie, 5 players out there, and then 4 subs. When it came out of the wash in just before Christmas from World Lacrosse now, there are now 12 players in the squad. I don't know the thinking behind it. As I say, it kind of helps, I think, the North Americans a little bit. I'm sure that wasn't the reason. Maybe it's health and safety with a second goalie, and that's fine. It is what it is. But it literally, if you think of the 12 players in a squad, are you going to go with 2 goalies? Probably. As I say, the health and safety, what would you do otherwise? The rules say you have to have a goalie on the field, and the goalie must be dressed in goalie's kit. You can have an outfield player who, changes into that, but you'd have to nominate that beforehand, I believe. So do you go with 2 goalies? Do you go with 1 and risk it? I don't know. Maybe it's a one-off game. You might go with 1. If it's a tournament, you probably go with 2. I think then looking within that, and this is a question come up before 6-a-side, people to me, kind of players are you looking for? And I said this when the girls' game went to 12-a-side, from 12-a-side to 10-a-side. Everyone's a midfielder now, I said, and people are laughing at me. Oh no, everyone's a midfielder. You've got to be able to play both ends, and particularly if you want to play the way we want to play, which is a dynamic attacking game. We don't want players to get a nosebleed when they cross the halfway line and get frightened and have to curl back. And so in the 6-a-side game, everyone has definitely got to be able to play both ways. But I think there is scope within a squad of 12 for a couple of what you might call defensive specialists, and then maybe a couple of attacking specialists. So I'm going to talk about England players because then it's not rude and not affecting somebody else. I could give other examples. But if you think someone like an Emma Oakley, for example, plays defence on the England senior team, but for a club team, she's quite often found in the midfield. Emma would be very good at that midfield defensive role. She's never going to be the quarterback of the attack. I hope she wouldn't mind me saying that. But she can score goals, and particularly in that transition bit of the game, very good. Likewise, Megan Whittle, who plays attack, for the England team, she's certainly got the speed to get between the lines and the up and down. Might not be a great one-on-one defender. She'll hate me saying that. I'm sure she'll brush up on that, but she can certainly close people down quickly. Let's just put it that way. So I think there is scope within a team of where everyone's got to be able to play both ways for a few specialists in one or two positions. You probably don't need a specialist draw control person because they're only going to get four a game. Now, if you've got players who can take the draw and do the other things as well, then that's great. So I think the balance of the squad is quite an interesting one. And I hope nobody asks me then what's the GB team looking like, because we haven't even got any close to that yet, thinking about it. But for me, it'll be the best players from England, Scotland and Wales. That would be the best players we can pick for taking the World Cup into consideration in terms of girls' legs and things like that. Fitness after the tournament. Do you pick the same players? Do you pick some other players? I don't know. That's for another day. Let's just get a game going sometime first. That'd be nice. So I talked about the rules a little bit. Tactically, so again, I think maybe from that first clip we saw earlier, it's kind of played a little bit of a, what do they call it, buffering, wasn't it, a little bit, so you didn't get the full speed. If you saw that at full speed, what you would have seen, and this is my experience from the two games we played and the other games I've seen on video, first time people play it, they're like, what's the word? A greyhound out of a trap. They're scurrying all over the place. Everyone's running as fast as they can. The game is chaos and madness. And then after about 5 minutes, it all just slows down. It's like, all right, now we can play at a proper pace. So I think the first thing people think it's hectic and try to make it. But again, speaking specifically now from our England game just before Christmas, we let the players play. We had two teams playing. And I let them play for a bit. And then after about 10 minutes, I said, do you think you're better just going completely freelance, which is what they were doing, just playing off the cuff and, using your skills and instincts? Or do you think you need some kind of shape from which you can freelance, if that makes sense? And I think the answer is probably not scientific. If Tom Wenham was on, we'd have to do a more deeper study probably. But the answer is you need a bit of a framework. Complete freelance is impossible to manage. In fact, it's counterintuitive. If you say players, just go out and do what you like, they'll be running into each other most of the time. They won't be given a space and the platform from which they can use their skills. And so I think you do need some kind of structure or shape to your attack. Again, if you saw the US, they basically had 5 players in front of goals. Canada like a box 4 and one at the top, I think, defensively just poking up, maybe playing a bit of a zone. And the US just stood around in a box shape, and every now and again someone cut through and they tried to find that pass to the back post. So a little bit of a shape and some kind of idea. Again, so I think I've had a few thoughts about that, and they're all sort of thoughts in my head because we've not been able to play the game or practice the game yet, so it's difficult to see that. But I'll just flash this by. I'm not expecting you to see it, but this is my different shapes, what you can have if you're playing with 5-on-5 attack players. As I say, I'm not expecting you to study that, and it's not rocket science. Certainly from the men's game, they'll recognise all those shapes: 1-3-1, 1-2-2. I don't know. As I say, the shapes are as limited by your imagination, but I think you do need some kind of balance. And the question there is, do you need players behind the goal? So kind of where I came in with that US team, you don't necessarily need any behind. They played without anybody behind. I still think there's a place for that because you want to get people's heads turning. I'm sure if a defensive coach was on here now and you say, would it be easier if they kept the ball in front all the time? The defensive coach is probably going to say yes. So I do think you need to mix that up. And I think you're looking at a lot of two-man game, picks for the ball, screens for the ball carrier, that kind of thing, picks off the ball. You want to get all your players involved and active, but I think there's a lot more two-man game kind of thing, I think, is where this will go. Substitutions is an interesting one. Do you run... you've got 5 players out there. Again, just looking at that clip, I think they were subbing in ones, it seemed to me. One player would go off each time, each turnover. Do you do that? Do you sub all three middies off, keep your specialist defender on or your specialist attacker on, depending on what position, what phase of the game you're in? Again, I don't know. I think that's down to personal choice. If you ran strings rather than just everybody just rotates, maybe you can have certain specialists. Let's talk about two-man game. So maybe you could have 4 players out there, 2 pairs who play together really well. Might be one way of working it. And you could take a pair off and put a different pair on. You know, I don't know, maybe you have Laura Merrifield and Mills Hayes, really tall pair, and Megan Whittle and Ruby Smith, a quicker sort of pair. So there are different ways, I think, of playing that. But I think there are possibilities around that tactically and how you work your subs. Welcome that cat. Excuse me. I think the other thing I'd say, and this is probably more women's versus men's, the fact that goalie can't cross the halfway line is still, we're trying to promote this as a mobile game. And I'm looking there, the US goalie there looked to me a bit like Emily Chandler in stature. And I know Emily would love to run over the halfway line with the ball. Well, you know, why can't we this day and age when the equipment is changed so much? I understand back in the day, some of those old black and white photos you see, people probably couldn't even run, never mind run over the halfway line. But nowadays, and certainly with a 70-yard pitch, 35 yards each way, whatever it is, from halfway, there is no reason why the goalie shouldn't be able to cross. But hey, as I say, I'm not losing any sleep or getting angry about it. It just is what it is. I think that's about it, really, Martin. Have you got any questions you want to ask in terms of a ramble?
I think if you just go through your ideas about principles and how that might influence shapes that people might try to adopt from the ten-a-side games, that might be a starting point or another extension sign.
Yeah. I mean, the principles, as I say, to me, they're just lacrosse basics. But I'll go back to my five-a-side football. When I was a kid and playing football, school ground, playground, whatever, or even formal five-a-side games, you lose possession, you get back goal side, you pick up, you know, you communicate, you don't give them any easy chances. And I think that's the same. So the first principle is if you turn it over, you get back in on defence, you pick someone up, you don't give them any easy length of the field clear to somebody stood wide open in front of goal. So almost that's the start for me, is you're anticipating, you're ready for that turnover, maybe a shot goes in, you're already anticipating that, and you're picking up, you're riding or redefending, whatever it may be. So the first one for me is that sort of defensive responsibility on a turnover. You don't want to give them anything easy, and that means you have to be sharp and alert and get back and pick up. I think the next bit then would be the sort of transition play, even though, as I say, it wasn't very evident in that clip we saw earlier. You're looking for fast breaks and you're looking to take advantage. 1v9, which we just talked about, trying to deny that, 2v1, 3v2, up to 4v3. And that is when you would want to keep the ball in front of goal. Back to principles. If you're running anything up to a fast break, all those fast breaks, you want to keep the ball in front of goal, and you want to kind of end up, ultimate shape would be a domino 4. If you get 4 attackers, a domino 4 in front of the goal, and they've got 3 defenders trying to cover those spots, then you just find the empty corner. So that to me is anything, 1v9, 2v1, 3v2, up to 4v3. You're just keeping the ball in front of goal and trying to find that open player. If it goes to 5v4, slow break, then again, my principle would be you want to get that around the side, down to the back of the goal and through X, making the defender's heads turn, and then you can find that kind of 5th player before the next player comes in on defense to pick them up. So I think those basic transition principles for attacking would be the same. I mean, defensively, I could go the same things. You want to form your triangles, blah, 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 make them pass it, slow them down. All the obvious things are the same as they would be in a normal lacrosse game. So you're just highlighting that up and down version of the game. Although, as I say, in my experience of 3 games that I've been involved in so far, you don't get as many as you think you would do in terms of clear fast break opportunities. People are too savvy. People are dropped in. People are, careful on their subbing and so on. And then I think with the ball, this is where I think some of those rules kick in. So 30-second shot clock, it's not necessarily your ball back if you shoot, it goes out the back line. I do think they might affect your thinking a little bit. Although I think players will find 30 seconds is longer than they think it is when they're actually out there with the ball. And it's a case of, obviously, you're always looking to score. So if someone's wide open in front of the goal, then you're going to take it at any time. But generally, you might want to be setting things up. You might want to kill that clock. So back to mine, we've got an equal number of possessions with whoever we're playing, USA or whatever it might be. Let's say we both get 4 possessions in a quarter of 8 minutes, 4 attacking possessions. How well are we going to convert those possessions? We want to use that time. Okay, as I say, depending on the score and the context in the game, you're always looking to score, but we want to keep that possession. We don't want to be giving the USA more bullets to fire, more attempts at goal. We want to control the game that way. Now, if we're 4-0 up, less important, but obviously we're talking about close competitive games. You want to really take that 20 seconds maybe before you go to goal. And again, if I flip that over, then there are lots of tactics defensively. You make it really hard for them. You know, you let them have it first 15 seconds, and maybe then you apply your pressure. Maybe you shut off the dangerous players with the last 10, 15 seconds ago. You put them under even more pressure with the shot clock. So there are different ways you can see that both sides. But I think in the context of, say, the GB team, I'd be thinking we want to control that possession and not just risk wasting after 5 or 6 seconds, you know. Principles. The fact you're not going to get the ball back from a shot might mean you're higher percentage shots, you know, decision making might revolve around higher percentage shots only. Whereas, you know, I don't know, so Megan Whittle, she scores 4 out of 10 shots in a field game. She maybe going to have to rethink her shooting in this game where we haven't got that. We can't afford that shot to misses, which we get back. You know, Megan, 4 goals out of 10 shots, but the rest of them usually miss the post narrowly and we get that ball back. So using that as an example, shot selection is probably another issue. And I say you'd be looking for a higher percentage chances before you crank it. Principles, seconds, balance. Back and over is an interesting one. So I think you just have to be careful of that. I think that's just something, again, the more games people play, I think that would just be a non-factor after a while. You just get used to that as a rule. I think that's it, Martin. Sorry.
Great. No, it's great. We've had a few kind of people chip in with some comments. I think the most telling one is Tom, who's got your position with GB on the men's side, and if he just wants to again almost share some of his initial thoughts that link to what you've said, that'd be really helpful. Tom, if you want to present yourself as well, that's okay, and then I'll come and address people's questions that they've put in.
Thanks, Craigie, and thanks, Phil. Really, really interesting to get your initial thoughts. My initial thoughts are I don't want to have any. I've got in my head a kind of a 4-stage cycle to this, and the first one is exploration. I think that these new rules give us a fantastic opportunity to really evaluate what effectiveness looks like. And yes, there will be lots of crossover and players coming from their own particular perspective, whether that's from women's lacrosse, men's field, box lacrosse. I think will be a really interesting one. So I would like to have a real open mind. That said, I fundamentally agree with everything you're saying, really, Phil, and certainly when we played it, we're not seeing as much transition as I think that some people felt there might have been. I absolutely think that it will favour those players who are incredibly efficient with their shooting, that those new rules in terms of backing up shots will make a significant difference. One thing that you touched on there, Phil, was towards the end of the shot clock, whether defensively your approach would be to go and pressure players, and you talked about locking off. I can see a lot of opportunity for what in the men's game we sort of call junk defences, you know, where you just kind of throw in little spanners to mess people around and locking off a couple of players and all that sort of stuff. I think will differ. But I also see the potential for some kind of zone. If you're playing a shot clock, and certainly if any team played with 1 player behind goal, I think you'd be well advised to pack all 5 of your defenders in front of goal. And there are some wording in the rules. It's interesting that Don's on that maybe makes it a little bit harder to play a really tight in zone. But it'd be interesting to see what referees' interpretations on that. But I do see some kind of zone. And then the other thing that I see as a fundamental difference between the men and the women is in terms of equipment. A lot of the male attack players will be used to dodging on long sticks. And we certainly saw that when America played Canada, that the American tackmen suddenly dodging on short sticks, it was happy days. So they wanted to initiate from behind, feed the ball to players cutting down on goal. and they have got big two-way middies who'll dodge from up top. Whereas Canada were absolutely box lacrosse. It was two-man game, a lot of pick and roll, a lot of little inside slips. I could see both being effective, and it depends on your perspective and where you come from. And maybe just to bring it back round to where I started from, that my approach would be, I think, just to play it and just see how it runs out and see what is effective, and then try and come at it with an open mind. I would also hope that we will see an enormous amount of creativity. That's what I'd like to see. I think it would be really interesting if men's game has changed immeasurably in terms of shooting one-handed, round the back now being the norm rather than the innovative creativity it was 20 odd years ago. And I think we'll hopefully see an explosion of that. But yeah, that hopefully, Martin, just gives you a few thoughts from me.
Just before I invite, sorry, Phil.
Can I just pick up on a couple of those things? Yeah. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I think you're right. The creativity, and I think talk about two-man game or two-woman game, whatever you want to call it. I think for me, that's why I talked about the midfield strings or pairs and things. I think that players playing together, I think, is going to be where the strength is. You'll get a couple of players who know each other work, two or three of them. And Jane looks one way, and I know she wants me to pass it the other way, or whatever it might be. It's those little things. I think that's where the creativity, the imagination, has got the scope because of the extra space, or the lack of players on defence. Can I pick up on a couple of rule things? So you're right about the zone defence, and maybe Tom, Don, you might want to. I don't know if you've got a comment on this. I was reading the other day, and in the women's game, which would normally be shooting space, there's no mention of shooting space, but it does talk about, is it building a wall or putting a wall up in front of the defence, which you're not allowed to do. But it wasn't very specific, which is good. I'm fine with. That was one. And then my other one, Don, so my second question was around draw control. And I just wondered if the powers that be have slipped in, they've withdrawn the pull draw option from the women's game, because it says hands must be to the left of the head on the stick. And now if you're pulling, anyway, I just want to, is that my interpretation, or is that what they meant to do on the draw? Have they taken the pull? There's only 4 in a game, so it doesn't really matter. But
I should probably introduce myself first, Phil. And I didn't mean to crash the party. I just wanted to really listen to get the views. So for those on the call that don't know me, I'm Don Blacklock, and the technical director for World Lacrosse, and responsible, good or bad, for this rule set. So and for the rules and officiating for the game. There's been a lot of great commentary on this. When we developed the rules for the draw, it was players that actually made that suggestion, and that's one of the things that I really want to ensure people understand. These rules were not written by officials. These rules were written by players, officials, and coaches. And there will be a few people on this call who I will have reached out to and said, what are your thoughts about this? And this is really, these rules have evolved from players. And that's really the way we really, really want it to be. So I don't have any specific commentary. There was no ulterior motive to removing the pull draw, as I recall, in any of our conversations, but that may be an unintended consequence as a result.
So just to jump in, sorry.
Shooting space kind of cool.
The shooting space was again another fundamental piece that the women really wanted to ensure. We need to ensure safety, of course, but they also didn't want to have the to be constricted with the fan, and we also needed a simplified field as well. So again, this one is going to be officiated quite tightly, of course. We want to always ensure player safety. The onus is on the shooter not to put a player into a dangerous position by taking the shot, but also on the defense by not just standing there and putting themselves in harm's way. So no jumping in front of shots, so to speak. So it's going to be a different concept without a shadow of a doubt, but we're confident that we've got the concept right, we might need to tweak it a little bit.
Thanks, Don. I don't want to get hung up too much on the rules, as Don probably knows. Let's just get playing. How simple do I have that view, Don? I've had a few questions come in, so I'd just like to go back to those. And if anything else sparks in people's thoughts, please put your hand up or add them to the chat box as we go. Rick Summers has a question. If you want to speak out, Rick, that'll be great. Thank you.
Good evening, Phil. Just an observation on transition. One of the reasons of lack of transition was because there was no players behind. So they're all in front of the goal attacking, so they all get back at the same time. So I think that's one of the reasons for not going behind. My question is that obviously in the girls' game, or the ladies' game, should I say, you're now going to be playing penalties, a minute and 30 seconds. How do you see the women's game adapting to that?
Well, my favourite thing, Rick, obviously, if we go woman up, we'll be playing 1-3-1 or something like that against their 4 defence. I think it's fine. We play. Sorry, the England team I can speak for now, really. We've spent a lot of time looking at those man-up situations and practicing for that. So I think that's another tick for me. I'm looking forward to that. It's another a bonus for us, if you like. Just have to stop those swipey checks from some of the players, you know.
And on the reverse, Tom, you're obviously going to have to play zone without long poles. How do you see that?
With the expectation that you're going to receive a shot, so it's then just becomes a game of trying to receive the shot that you want, i.e. as far out and from as poor an angle as possible. And I think you'd kind of see a fairly sloughed in, packed zone, basically. I mean, that's the way it's going to have to be. As I said before, we have experimented in the full field game with locking people off when man downs, whether that might be something that you do just to mess with teams. And I think a little bit will depend on how teams line up against you. I think if a team put a player behind the goal, that may also potentially, and then initiated from there, that may change how you played it. But I would think you'd play a box 4 zone, basically, will be the I would feel would probably be my initial stance.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Rick. Has anyone else got any questions, any thoughts? Rob Gooch has made some points and Tom's answered them. I don't know if you want to ask that to Phil as well, Rob. See if there's a transfer from the men's and the women's rules. About pressure from the defence onto the attack.
Yeah, my question I asked in the chat, which Tom has answered, basically do we see any impact with the men's game? The contact rules are slightly toned down to 6v6, and whether we'd see any noticeable difference with that.
So you're asking me that?
Well, I'm asking anyone who wants to add a comment.
I don't know. I imagine the contact will be as heavy as it always was once they get used to it, and when they find what they can get away with, I think the contact will be what it will be. You know, I don't. I'm sure the officials will manage it safely, but I don't see them playing softer.
And from my side, Rob, my feeling is that the big hit, the really kind of knocks the snot out of your takeout that you see in the men's game, is pretty rare. I mean, it doesn't happen that often. And what, as I put in the chat, I think will be key is how the referees officiate the more, I guess, sort of general gameplay of contact. And I think ground balls would probably be an obvious area, you know, how that's officiated. And you know, I guess time will tell and we'll see, but I would also expect there to be far fewer ground balls. You're talking about, you know, less interceptions, less knockdowns and all of that kind of stuff. So I don't think the ball will be on the floor as much as it is in the full field men's game. And then I guess the other area of contact that you sometimes see in the men's game would be the big slide, would be the defender sliding up onto a dodging midi. Whether teams will be as quick to slide, or whether they'll just go and select out and out athletes and turn it into, in effect, a one-on-one game, I think remains to be seen. Or those teams that are unbelievably well drilled will slide incredibly quickly. A phrase we use, and I would imagine we'll see a lot of this in the six-a-side, is that teams will slide to contain. They won't slide to collide. And you'll do that because you'll want to invite an outside shot. I don't think, as we've seen from all the videos, what's really hurting teams is giving up shots on the doorstep. So I think teams will probably play in a way that is less physical anyway. They won't want to initiate that contact.
Can I add to that, Tom? Because I think that's a really good point. That you don't need to win the ball back because it's coming your way after 30 seconds anyway. So the way you play your defence, not saying you can't strip the ball away, don't get me wrong, but you don't need to be looking to get it back because you know if you do your job right, force that narrow angle shot, it's coming your way anyway, you know. And that's, as you say, with the slide, that slide to where you would slide to get the ball back, hopefully, you don't need to that. You can be more conservative and slide just to deny that shot or the next pass, you know.
Quick other question for Tom, if I may. Tom, do you think that some box-like men's tactics might be used, like Canadians doing cheeky little holds and cheeky little screens and the things that technically aren't allowed in the 6v6, but in a small field to get some space, they might start doing some cheeky little box-like moves?
100%. I absolutely do. I mean, Canada played USA, and that's what it looked like. I mean, to be honest, a lot of it looked like Phil described. It just looked like, you know, just madness. But, well, to be honest, unbelievable creativity and high quality lacrosse is what it did look like, but it wasn't much structure to it. But when Canada did get into settled patterns of play, they played a man game, the slips, the picks, pick and roll. I would imagine the Iroquois will do the same. I think that this version of the sport will really favour those kind of teams.
Brilliant. Thanks for answering that, Tom. Thanks, Rob. There's been a couple of points I've probably triggered it, as well as Karina kind of reading my mind. Phil, and I kind of know Tom's views, but I'm going to target this at Phil because we've got a lot of female coaches and so on the call. How do you see this being a development tool for the junior game? Is it something that could be used in schools, adopted in a club? Bear in mind, quite a lot of what we're doing within the talent pathway is using six-a-side games, because we're not going to prescribe what position someone is at 14, you know, so it makes sense that get through your transition and so on. Phil, over to you.
I think it's ideal, and I at the moment I'm coaching, I think, 3 different schools, and we all use small-sided games all the time. Now, whether it's 6 or 4 or 8 or whatever it is, or 3, we use these small-sided games all the time. And so to me, it's just, yes, it's definitely useful. And particularly I talk about Charterhouse, where we're low on numbers. It's just one of the sports that girls play. And we probably have maybe 20 lacrosse players in the 6th form from which we produce our team. Now, we can play 6-a-side at a decent level. You know, our best 6 is a decent team. We could play against other schools. We could be competitive. So if there was an England lacrosse school 6s tournament or whatever, we'd definitely be in for that. Whereas we struggle on the 12-a-side because sometimes we've only got 12, you know, so our best 12 is the 12. But I think in terms of skills and development for players in schools, the fast break, the transition, the ground ball, pick it up and move it, the one-on-one, the 2-man game, all the things we talked about are the skills you need to practice. And these are things you should be doing at school anyway. So breaking them down, they're all things that won't be wasted thinking, well, that's just for the 6-a-side game. Anything you do for the 6s, to me, will be useful in the full field game. There's more that you won't, there's some things you won't cover, you know, riding, clearing maybe as a formal thing. But generally speaking, the individual skills and the sort of up and downness of the game, all those things will be covered. So doing your transition practice, all the things you'll have in your level 1 and 2 coaching manuals, you know, fast breaks, all that stuff, that's all very relevant. Finishing, we talked about quality of finishing, shooting, you know, feeding, all those skills are going to be great.
Thanks, Phil. Has anyone else got any other questions, any other points they'd like to raise? I'm very conscious that we're kind of chipping away at what we don't quite know what it looks like from a British perspective. For me, I do like the points that Tom raised about his creativity, and yes, Rob Gooch, it definitely should be that way for the men's and the women's. Get our creative going. Points I've taken from what Phil said about it's good to work out pairings and partnerships, that you might have your idea from 6v6 around the goal. Well, it's going to be more evident to create space and take space around the goal in that shorter space. I think for me, it's that interesting point about, yeah, the shot clock's there, but actually doesn't really matter. You know, if you've got your principles and you work the ball or you work the space, it's going to open up more and more for the shots.
Mark,
yeah.
Can I just pick on that point? I think it's really important is that coach-led game, player-led game. If we think about that kind of angle, in a 12-a-side, a 10-a-side, you know, you've got all your strategy and your tactics, and the coach is kind of coming up with trying to match the other team. I think in a 6-a-side game, yes, you will have things you've practiced, things you've rehearsed, 2-man moves, things like that. But once they step over that line and in the 6-a-side game, I think it's down to the players. You know, you hopefully you've got good habits, you've got them prepared well. It's not going to be a case of every 2 seconds the coach shouting out a new tactic from the sideline. The players are going to have to read what they see, deal with it, and, you know, draw on whatever they've been practicing doing. What I was reading something the other day is about a race, you know, a horse racing, and the trainer. And the trainer, you know, he prepares for the horse for the race, he gets it fit and everything. He's got a racing plan which he gives to the jockey. But once the race is on, the trainer stood in the stand watching it, and the jockey has to deal with the horse. You know, they have to make their own decisions on the hoof, as it were. And I think, okay, that's an extreme example. But, you know, in the 6-a-side game, I think we're more, it's a player-led, what are we going to do here, than it is going to be a constant coach. This is a game plan, you know, blah, blah, blah. Now, that doesn't mean you won't have a game plan and that sort of thing, but every situation, I think, is going to be right. Tom's defence suddenly flashes out and shuts off the person we're going to dodge with. What do? You're not going to look to the sideline and go, Coach, what do we do? They're going to have to deal with it. So I think that bit, you know, you talk about creativity. I think managing your game is going to be a thing that the English game, I can only speak for England at the moment, definitely needs. Probably the UK game, I could probably stretch that far, but I know about England. That sort of creativity, savviness, dealing with the situations, I think is an area where we need to get better. And I think this would be one vehicle for helping us to do that.
Thanks, Phil. I couldn't unmute myself. I've got a question from Jane McCarthy. If you'd like to unmute yourself, Jane.
Thanks, guys. Hi, Phil.
Hi, Jane.
Hi, Tom. General question in terms of planning and looking ahead is, what sort of timelines are you looking at in terms of selection and training for your GB squads? And I asked the question in terms of COVID, we don't know. But just in terms of managing the England men's squad, the England ladies squad, the under-19s that are now doing under-20s, etc. Just kind of generally, how are you dealing with it, and what are your plans?
Well, if I start, Tom, my plan was when they put the World Games back 12 months, it was great, because I was going to sort of, at the home internationals last year, I was going to start talking about it with a view to it being this July coming, you know. But that went out the window. So the honest truth is, I don't know, Jane, because it's impossible to know. We haven't got a start date. And so it's really difficult. I don't want to mess with the home country coaches, Scotland, Wales, are, you know, for the World Cup. As we stand now, and back to the kind of where we started, the 10-a-side game is the most important version of the game at the moment for the home countries. I'm sure they would all say that here, even though GB is going to be important. So I don't want to cut across them. And I started talking to Scotland, and then the whole lockdown thing came in, and we've just basically gone no further. So I think we just need to get an idea of daylight when we might be able to do something, and then think about what the home country nation's doing for the World Cup and try and work around that. I can't be clearer than that, Jane. I wish I could say something, but I don't know, to the honest truth. I'm very conscious of not competing for the same players, you know, and burdening the players in that run up to the World Cup. Very conscious of that.
Thanks, Phil. I think that's a fair response. Tom?
Yeah, hi, Jane. And you're going to hear broadly the same from myself, I'm afraid. I've spoken to all of the head coaches of the home nations, and we've had preliminary conversations, which then basically got knocked on the head for 12 months. And we've kind of picked things up and at least established links. So I guess there's kind of a couple of principles rather than specific dates. One is that the European Championships, fingers crossed that it goes ahead this summer. That is the priority. So like Phil, there's absolutely no point me trying, I don't think, from a GB perspective, to do anything other than work in collaboration with the home nation. So I see that post Europeans, work with home nations post Europeans would be the priority. That said, I think there are some opportunities to use and embed small-sided games into national squads training, and that is something that has been discussed certainly with the England team, and that we sort of have sort of semi-quasi GB stroke England training sessions, and that opportunity would be available for Wales and Scotland. So basically an addition to what they're doing. And then the other principle that isn't yet firmly in stone, but I certainly wouldn't be looking at this stage at any kind of open trial. I think that there's just that much lacrosse to be fit in a very short space of time when we do get things back up and running, that I don't think there'd be much that would be learnt from bringing players in for an open trial. So I think it's more likely that there will be a training squad, and that training squad will then, a selection process will come from that, as opposed to selecting a squad right from the get-go from an open trial.
Thanks, Tom. Jane?
Martin, if Jane Powell was on, and maybe that's Jane, but one of the things we talked about is, if and as and when we do get going, is say a home country six-a-side tournament for the women's side, definitely. So we have our home internationals, put a six-a-side down there, then at least that you could see all the possible contenders, playing, and that doesn't detract from their national team preparation or anything.
It's such a boring politician response from myself, isn't it? We've just got to wait till we know when we can actually start up and play. It's when can we squeeze as much in? I agree on certain points about, well, trial might not work, and we just don't really know what's going on anywhere, and decisions by World Lacrosse are being pushed back and further. So at this time, it's not really the forum for us to kind of comment on those. It's nice to know your thoughts right now, but there's nothing definite in your planning, is there?
And actually, Craigie, you know what? When I asked the question, I knew they couldn't really answer it, but it was quite good to see what their thoughts were.
And I knew that was the point. I'll just kind of just towing the party line, to be honest. Right. I've got one more question, and then I will wrap this up, because we said an hour, and that's where we come to. Emma Barlow's got a hand up.
Mute, maybe.
Emma. I'm trying to scroll through to find Emma.
She's saying that she can't unmute herself.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find her on the list.
What was the question, Craigie?
She hasn't told me yet.
Oh, okay.
Emma, do you want to type your question and I'll read it to Phil, or Phil can read it?
I can see it if you want, Craigie.
Yeah, please.
Basically, there's a few people put up. He's asking about plans for sort of six-a-side national schools type competitions and club bits and bobs. So it's all related to that opportunity to roll a game out.
I suppose that's kind of a question you and I can answer as much as anyone, Richard. If you want to talk from a Northwest perspective, Richard?
I can talk regionally from again the Northwest and the Regional Association. Their plans is that there are plans to sort of integrate tournaments into the existing programme. So again, looking at how the two could dovetail together. So there are definitely plans to roll those out within the club game. But equally, as we move forward, the regions are also looking at trying to engage more with the schools within the Northwest. So again, that would roll out and include those and link it in. So there are plans to look at university tournament, schools tournament, club tournaments at various age groups right the way through. It based around the short-sided format, but again, dovetailing into existing programs rather than sort of getting in the way of it, because again, it's already a fairly packed program.
Yeah. So I think the idea of the playgrounds podium as well is more how, as an organisation, we can try and expand provisions, not compete or try to do anything, as Richard said, that is already trying to squeeze anything in that can't be squeezed into the existing club calendar. So again, there's lots that can be talked about or expanded upon. We're right at the start of this, and the main purpose of this call was, we're looking at new ideas, new concepts, from coaching to how we might implement it into our training ideas, to how Tom and Phil are delivering ideas for the GB in preparation for the World Games, and I'm excited to kind of be involved in that in this tiny way with the girls and the boys on the talent pathway, because it's part of how we train, and that's really exciting for me.
I mean, I think from my own point of view, and club level and the coaching I do, I'd love the opportunity to do something other than short-sided games. But essentially, when you are club coaching in both men's and women's club lacrosse, you're lucky if you get enough to do full field. So, like I say, it's a natural progression to me. It's like a direct link to what's already happening. Short-sided game forms an important part in my club coaching in both men's and women's. So, I like to say, I think it's a natural progression automatically.
Again, I think we're kind of coming to time, and there's been some real good discussions around this. And if you've got any ideas, any points, I'm more than happy for you to kind of share those ideas with myself. My email was on the original electronic flyer notice post. So please feel free to get in touch with me. It's great. I've seen so many familiar names on the screen popping up and adding comments. Don, thank you for chipping in, and well done to Richard, Tom, Phil, myself for not chipping in on rules and coaches' views and so on. So thank you for that one. Again, real big thank you to Phil. Tom, thanks again for putting your views across. I'm sure if we ran this in a year, 18 months time, we'd be having a different conversation about what our learnings are from this stage. Final cheesy comment from myself: stay safe, and hopefully I'll see you on the side of the lacrosse pitch in the next few months or so. Phil, have you got any closing comments?
No, thanks. As I said, I just don't see a downside. The people saying, is this going to take over? Is it putting the other game out? There's no downside to me. It's just another version of the game. If it really takes off and we get in the Olympics, great. If it doesn't, I don't think there's anything lost, Just enjoy it. To me, I'm back to where I started. I've always enjoyed as a player playing small-sided games because they're the bits that are most fun. Scoring goals, outwitting your opponent, whatever it might be. They're the bits that I used to like, whether it was football or lacrosse. So I don't see any downside to it at all. Thanks very much for listening, everybody. And as Martin says, probably we'll have a bit more specific information, hopefully, in the future. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Martin, can we just quickly mention that we are looking at putting several other evenings on like this, looking at various elements, men's specific, women's specific. So please keep an eye out for those evenings that we're looking to put a series of on as we go forward during these interesting times.
Thanks, Richard. Great stuff. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.